Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So this week I'm going to be doing some charcoal landscape sketching or drawing. And while you're watching me doing the sketching, I'll also be talking about why I use charcoal, why I would recommend it to other people, the good things I think about using charcoal, which, might be of some interest or use to somebody out there watching the video. So the first thing I would recommend, the first reason why I would recommend charcoal to anybody is the price. So charcoal is one of the cheaper art materials that you can get. And the charcoal itself, it'll work, this sort of vine charcoal that I'm using, it works on pretty much any sort of paper. I've used it on newsprint, on expensive paper, on cheap sketchbook paper, on photocopy paper for photocopy machines, all kinds of different types of papers, including some very cheap papers. A second reason why I would recommend charcoal is it's kind of linked to the first one, and it's to do with experimenting. So because it's quite a cheap material, I'm not too worried about experimenting. I'm not worried if the final result doesn't work. If I was using expensive paint, paper, canvas or something, I might be a bit more reluctant to experiment and try different things. So charcoal's good for experimenting with things like composition, things like values. In the case of landscapes, trying to create a sense of depth and figuring out how you can, different tricks you can use to create that feeling of depth in a landscape. Another reason then is that it actually has quite a low learning curve. So what I mean is, if you're getting started with something like oil painting, acrylic painting, watercolors, soft pastels, whatever medium you want to get started with, you can expect quite a steep learning curve initially. It will take some time before you can make the medium do whatever it is that you want it to do. It'll take some time before you can figure out what the limitations are of the medium and what the strengths and weaknesses are of that particular medium. I found with charcoal, however, the learning curve was a lot shallower. It was quite easy to get into charcoal. Within days or weeks, you're able to make it do whatever it is that you want it to do. And you become aware of the pros and cons and the strengths and weaknesses of the charcoal. You can also get, of course, charcoal in different forms. I was using a vine charcoal, and there I was using a charcoal pencil. Again, the charcoal pencils are relatively cheap as well. Other materials I use is a piece of tissue paper and a kneaded eraser. And you'll see me using that in a few seconds. So you can see with the kneaded eraser, it's good for lifting off some of the charcoal to reveal sort of white paper underneath. So it's good for creating this sort of implied detail. Another good thing about the charcoal is it kind of forces you to think about values rather than colors. It is, I guess, completely understandable that when people get started with a particular medium, say watercolor, they tend to fixate on the colors. What colors should I use? That type of thing. The colors that you use, it is important, but the values are equally important, and people sometimes overlook this idea of values.
But with the charcoal, of course, you have no color. You can get colored charcoals, kind of, but if we think only of the black charcoal, then there's no colors to worry about. The only thing you have is values. So you're kind of forced to think about varying the values and how that, again, in the case of landscapes, how that can build up implied detail, how that can add to things like aerial perspective to get that feeling of depth and things. So it's a good way of training yourself to think about values. The charcoal is also good in that you can create lines with the charcoal, but you can also create shapes. If you were using, say, pencil, pencil is more limited to lines. You can turn the pencil on its side and sort of create shapes, but it's not as versatile as a piece of charcoal, in my opinion anyway. One more reason why I would recommend charcoal is particularly for people who are interested in watercolor painting, and that is how to use white paper. So in this final sketch, you can see there's places where I've put down charcoal and then used the kneaded eraser to lift off some of the charcoal. That creates a little bit of detail and interest and texture. But there's also places where I've left the paper blank. I haven't put any charcoal on. And that use of white paper is something that I want to experiment more with, not just in charcoal landscapes, but also in watercolor landscapes. Okay, so like I say, today was kind of a niche topic, I guess. Not for everybody, but I think there are reasons why, I think logical, good reasons why I recommend anybody who's into painting to try out charcoal, especially if you're into landscapes. I say it's a good way of forcing yourself to think about values. You can experiment with composition and things. Overall, it's definitely something I would recommend. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching, and hopefully see you in next week's video.